Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Sakura spun the sword, adjusting it on her left forearm as she pivoted on her heel to bring it around her in another protective arc. The blackness that hovered before her again instantly shielded her enemies from view, which could be considered both advantageous and disadvantageous for her. For the first, Mako and Hisa immediately rushed forward, using the ninjutsu as a cloak. They crisscrossed her, one taking a swipe at her from the front right and the other coming from the left. When Hisa's blade came from the right, Sakura's first instinct was to dodge and strike her foe in the side with her fists as she passed. But with her chakra currently restricted, Sakura ducked, pushed up on the handle of her assault weapon with her forearm, and brought her own blade naturally to Hisa's right flank as she redirected the attack. Sakura hissed in disappointment because the cut was interrupted when she retreated and the result was shallow, not slicing deep enough to incapacitate her. When Hisa took a step back, clutching her flank, Mako suddenly appeared like a breaching shark from the deep only inches before Sakura's face. He kicked her, quite hard, and Sakura fell into the sand, her weapon tossed aside from the blow. She scrambled for it as Mako grabbed hold of her ankle. She kicked free of his hold, but he was upon her, knees straddling her, and Sakura had no choice but to turn and face him. He cuffed her hands above her head, saying quietly, "Don't make this difficult. You will lose your life if you continue to resist. They'll kill you. Stop struggling." Sakura cursed herself for drinking that damn tea, because if she had chakra, she would headbutt his face so far back into his skull that the impact would instantly kill him. Hisa's face suddenly appeared above Mako's right shoulder. Killing her is the only option. We don't have time to hold her hostage, she chastised Mako with venom in her voice. We have to get back to base quickly with the news of her death. We could use her. She's too important to kill immediately. Came Mako's response as he sat down hard against her bucking legs. We don't have time for this. The drug effects won't last on her all the way back to Tanagakure. Perfect, Sakura thought. The confirmation she had been looking for. They were in fact the same party of ninja who had attacked her and Sasuke on their journey to Suna. Sakura still wasn't entirely sure just how many belonged to their group. Reach in my pocket for the second dose. We will knock her back out if we have to. Came Mako's reply, but it was too late. Sakura had been calling her chakra to her wrists this entire time and used that small amount of sudden strength to overpower Mako's hold, swinging her arms quickly back down to her sides, which caused Mako's own arms to follow. His head hit the ground to the left of her neck and Sakura immediately rolled him, best riding him the same way he had just held her. Hisa didn't hesitate a second as her weapon came swiping horizontally across Sakura's back. Sakura predicted this and used Mako's struggling momentum to once again roll him back on top of her. The blade bit into the flesh of his back and he screamed. In the same moment, Sakura used the last of her strength to wedge her knees between herself and Mako's chest, shoving him out and back toward a surprised Hisa. They both fell tangled back into the shadowy mist, hitting sand somewhere out of sight. Within seconds, Sakura scrambled toward the lost weapon and the sword she had dropped was within Sakura's reach. But when she fisted the pommel, a foot stepped down on the blade. The black mist cleared to reveal the eyeless depths of the shadow demon above her. Enough of this, he hissed. Shadows leaked from his eyes, down his face, and crawled down his chest, legs, and over the length of the weapon, icing Sakura's fingers when they touched the handle. Sakura immediately recoiled in pain as her fingers turned a sickening black. She screamed, backing away from his advancing figure, hand tucked protectively in the crook between her arm and side. Rage more than fear boiled beneath Sakura's skin. What sick ninjutsu was this? It reminded her of a combination between Zabuza's hidden mist technique and Shikamaru's shadow control. But the damage was entirely unexpected, as if the shadows inside his body were made of a poisonous substance that bleached out the life of whatever it touched. This phantom before her controlled darkness directly, thickening what already existed in the air around them, and then leaking black chakra directly from his body, which destroyed whatever came in contact with it. Like the shadows of death itself, Sakura was certain it had stolen all life from her immovable hand. Sakura cursed and bolted to the left, seeking out the jagged rocks that she had created earlier. She had to test a theory. Sakura slowed as she clutched her hand, listening, keeping an eye on her feet at all times in fear of creeping black, knowing the phantom would pursue. When his steps came closer, Sakura turned and faced him. A chakra-manipulated path cleared the darkness between them, allowing the two ninja to see each other in the surrounding haze. This confirmed one thing for Sakura. No one, including the ninja user himself, could see through the darkness he created. That was good to know. Just one more thing then. She waited and the shade sneered as he approached. When he came within a few feet away, shadows reached for her like grasping fingers. Just as she had seen Tamari do all those years ago during the Chunin exams, Sakura backed away until the shadows stopped and retreated back into the skull of the demon who had projected them. She drew a line in the sand, confirming the distance of 10 feet between them. Ha, she thought to herself. Just like Shikamaru's Just-Su then. Similarly, it had a limited reach, although it was much shorter than Shikamaru's range and didn't seem to be able to use the shadows in the air around it to lengthen or widen. It explained the purpose of the shadows in the air though. The phantom ninja needed to be in close range where individuals couldn't see the approaching black tentacles of death. Sakura scoffed. Apparently, this ninja couldn't measure up to Shikamaru's intelligence either, considering the fact that she had just figured out how his ninjutsu worked. There was only one problem, though. Sakura was a close combat shinobi as well, and her number one battle technique was her chakra-enhanced strength. She needed a plan that would allow her to take a different approach. She ran and her attacker pursued her, thickening the air before her but leaving the trail behind her completely clear. Suddenly, Mako's words from earlier came back to her, which gave Sakura an idea. It was the only thing Sakura could think of. She doubled back to where Mako and Hisa had been disposed. She followed the blood in the sand to the precipice of a jagged chunk of earth. When she came upon Mako, Sakura noted that Hisa was already gone, having abandoned him immediately. Hisa was probably blindly searching for Sakura among the shadow-cloaked mountains of ground and sand. Sakura didn't have much time. She placed her hand over Mako's mouth so he wouldn't scream and give away their location, not that it would do much good. If the phantom had room for a brain somewhere next to that pit of darkness in his skull, he would follow the blood as she had, or trace her tracks in the sand. Mako, laying on his bloody back in the sand, shot his eyes open when Sakura's hand pressed down hard on his mouth with her black hand. It was barely more than a useless appendage at this point, but with the help of her good hand, Sakura shoved her fingers in his mouth to silence him. He tried biting them, tearing into her blackened flesh. But Sakura couldn't feel them at all, the deadening so complete that Sakura was afraid she would never regain use of it again. With her free hand, Sakura searched Mako's person. Her hand fisted triumphantly in his back pocket around something long and cylindrical. She pulled it free, praying frantically that it was what she theorized it to be. Bless you for being thorough and for telling me you had it, she thought to Mako as she surveyed the capped yellow injection tube. Whether it was Ashua or a second dose of whatever he had put in her tea, Sakura didn't know. But whatever it was, Mako had revealed its purpose to Hisa, which was to incapacitate her again once the current drug in her system stopped working. Mako squirmed beneath her and Sakura contemplated killing him right then and there. But she just didn't have time. Lucky bastard. She sprinted from him, the phantom stepping over the boulder in the same moment she darted from the concealed spot. Did he see what she grabbed? Sakura wasn't confident but couldn't stop to try to interpret the eyeless facial expression the ninja wore. Remaining hopeful, she kept running. Spotting a smaller set of tracks in the sand leaving the location, Sakura followed them, tracing them all the way to their source. When Sakura came upon Hisa, she almost collided with her directly, the blackened air only revealing her in the last second. Hisa didn't even have a chance to react before Sakura uncapped the needle and dispensed a third of the dose into her neck, enough for her weight. The woman dropped to the ground and Sakura thanked Mako again for designing the perfect drug. Sakura didn't estimate that she would remain unconscious for long, though, not having the full dose. Sakura moved quickly. There was only a matter of minutes before the phantom caught up to her once again. Sakura quickly removed the cloak from Hisa's shoulders and wrapped Hisa's face covering around her own. She picked up Hisa's small rapier from the ground. She turned and walked toward the approaching footsteps, using the black at her back to her advantage this time, thankful for once that it would conceal Hisa's body completely. When she came into his view, the ninja balked, taken aback at her familiar presence. "Hisa," came the hissing whisper. Sakura kept her head down long enough. Long enough to come parallel with him and turn the blade to relieve him of his head. He ducked as Sakura knew he would. Dropping the short sword, she came back toward his face with the hidden syringe in the same hand. Like with Hisa, she caught him in the neck with the needle neck, and his black sockets widened as she fully pressed in the plunger. Deathly black shot out of his eye sockets, gripping her remaining hand with blackness as it traveled up her arm. She cried out in both pain and fury as the medicine injected into the demon's skin. He screamed and she pulled away as he dropped to his knees. His consciousness remained momentarily, and Sakura turned, arms limp and useless from damage like Orochimaru's had been. Turning, Sakura found the sword she had dropped. Bending down, she gripped it between her teeth, the taste of metal and sand coating her tongue. It tasted so sweet in that second. Like another mist demon she remembered, Zabuza Momochi, Sakura wielded the blade between her teeth and pivoted to face this monster who was solely responsible for torturing Isao, spreading hatred and pain, and most of all, underestimating her. Sakura would never be weak enough that anyone without substance, anyone who couldn't consider themselves subpar to a legendary Sannin, could dispose of her easily. She didn't need abilities. She didn't even need chakra to make it out triumphant in these futile attempts on her life. "You will regret your choices," the phantom hissed disorientated. "The next generation won't be able to handle what is coming." Sakura began to advance toward him, ready to mimic Zabuza's killing blows with a fang-wielded blade. When she reached him, she glared down at him, bloodlust in her veins. War is a good thing. Anger is a tool to be used. Vengeance is necessary to strengthen. Sakura gripped onto her own blood-bent mind, talking to herself as she looked at this man, beast, whatever he was. And as she had done with Sato, Sakura now too, thought of Sasuke. A person so wrapped in darkness that the darkness presented itself in his very nature. "You, like everyone else, deserve mercy," Sakura announced after she dropped the sword from her mouth. Sakura had once blamed herself for being too weak to kill Sasuke, but in this moment, Sakura had an enlightening clarification. When someone so vile deserves death and you can find it in yourself to drop your too ready hand of justice and offer them a second chance, that is real strength. It's what Naruto would have done. It's what Sakura chose to do now. The man slumped forward, eyes level with the blade that stuck up from the sand. "You will see one day that I am right," he hissed in finality. "You have us confused with one another," she announced to the fading darkness that began to disintegrate into light, the final sign signaling his unconsciousness. Sakura could just make out the sunrise in the east and it was beautiful, pale, and rosy. Sakura pretended it was her victory banner. She also believed it was a sign of hope. The second chakra pill worked another miracle. Sasuke felt replenished as he practically flew across the sand path in Isao's memory. He had only run this fast a few times in his life and most recently, it was because of this same scenario. Kido, too, had kidnapped Sakura, and when Sasuke had found out, he had run. Sasuke cursed himself now for his stupidity. His pride. His mission. He had left in anger and confusion after their kiss, left her alone in Suna despite his promise to never let this sort of thing happen again. Each step he took into the sand was echoed in his mind with an apology. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. He lost count of how many times he said it. Chakra coursed through his limbs and Sasuke mentally prepared himself for war. Bones enveloped his body, ribs caging around him as he activated an incomplete Susanoo. Purple chakra radiated from him, a threatening beacon to the kidnappers he knew would be nearby. Sasuke instantly recognized the projections of broken ground that penetrated up from the sand like a golden crown. Unlike in Isao's shadowy memories, the morning light illuminated each pillar, revealing the sheer length and size of every new peak that Sakura had brought forth with her inhuman strength. Sasuke didn't even think of concealing his presence, he didn't need to. He charged into the center of the fray, looking about him everywhere. He looked behind a few of the crags, eyes finally landing on an individual. Bloody, but not unconscious, Mako lay with his face projected to the sky. His eyes shot open when Sasuke placed a heavy foot on his chest. He wanted to light him up with his Amaterasu and let the flames devour him alive until the ninja was nothing more than the sand beneath him. Mako groaned and Sasuke unsheathed his katana, stabbing into this ninja's shoulder. Although he didn't need to pin him to the ground, it felt good to watch Mako clutch at the blade near his collarbone. The medic ninja was still alive despite his blood loss, but Sasuke relished in the thought that he wouldn't be for long. Gaara might be mad at him for this later, but Sasuke didn't care. Where is she? The Uchiha hissed as he sent electricity down the length of his blade into Mako's chest muscles. He began to spasm. Stop. Mako screamed in pain. It will stop when you answer. He yelled back, losing control of his own emotions. He twisted the metal for emphasis. Sasuke, stop, came a familiar voice and Sasuke's dropped the blade in shock as Sakura threw her shoulder into him. I don't have enough chakra to spare to heal any more wounds, she reprimanded him as if she were talking to a patient. Sasuke blinked in chastisement at the pink-haired woman standing whole before him. He instantly pulled her into his Susanoo, crushing her to his side as he extended the ribcage of the Susanoo to include her. He looked around warily as if he couldn't quite believe there was no current threat to Sakura's person. He finally spoke, both relief and annoyance edging his words. You're okay. Where are the others? I'm fine, she announced, face suddenly red in embarrassment at their close proximity. Sasuke didn't notice it at first as he held her back at arm's length to check her current state. His stomach dropped when he saw her dangling arms, blackened, charred, and bruised. One of them currently had a small halo of green around it and its color paled in comparison to the other. Who did this to you? He rumbled lowly, flashing a red and purple glare back down at Mako, who whimpered pathetically from his wounds. Sakura pulled from his hand and moved in front of the Uchiha, cutting off his direction of blame. Not him, she excused, and her defense thoroughly pissed Sasuke off. Whatever Mako's role was in this, Sasuke was certain that he was to blame for all of it. Sasuke did his best to swallow his murdering thirst, eyes landing back on her like a lifeline to his sanity. Tell me what happened, he ordered. It was the only words that he could force past his teeth. I will explain everything to you, but I need your help first. She made to step away from him, but Sasuke prevented it. Careful not to aggravate her injuries by touching her arm, Sasuke grabbed her shirt on reflex instead, pulling her back into the safety of the Susanoo. It's okay. We're safe. She breathed, smiling at him for the first time since he had left her, which brought Sasuke back some soothing clarity of mind. They are all incapacitated. Sasuke's eyebrow shot up into his bangs. All of them. It's insulting that you are surprised, she nudged him with her shoulder, turning her shoulders to face Mako. She bent to medically assess his new stab wound. I wasn't expecting, he admitted, but then fell into silence at her targeted look. I mean, I thought that you were drugged. I am, she announced, narrowing her eyes further. But I don't know how you know that. Sasuke cursed at his slip. He couldn't tell her just yet about how he practically forced Isao to spill all the information earlier. Instead, he said half-truthfully, I ran into the kid. Isao. Sakura's face lit up. He's okay. He made it back. She slumped into the sand at Mako's side. She practically deflated as her concern for the boy evaporated. Bless that child. Sasuke had to agree. If it weren't for him, Sasuke wouldn't have been able to find his teammate this quickly. Even though Sakura hadn't really needed his help after all. How strange that felt for Sasuke, to not be needed in the ways that he had once been. It was an unexpected jolt to his mindset toward Sakura. She had proved her strength repeatedly to him and he continued to see her as someone to protect. Before he could even offer an apology, Sakura motioned toward Mako's body. My arms are a little preoccupied at the moment. Do you mind flipping him? Sasuke's thoughts instantly darkened at the mention of both her arms and Mako. What for? I need to look at his back. See how deep the wound is. He doesn't deserve your help, he replied instantly, wishing for the ninja to suffer in the same ways he had made his friend. I remember a time when you didn't either, Sakura replied with a smiling voice, but I helped you back then, too. Now flip him. Sasuke scoffed at her statement, stooped, and flipped the ninja on his stomach. Mako let out a pained groan and Sakura, tsked, at his blatant carelessness. He kneeled beside her, ready to be her hands despite how much he hated the thought of her trying to help him. It's not as deep as I thought. Hold his flesh together, she ordered and Sasuke did so as she summoned a small stream of chakra to the gray fingertips of her semi-healed hand. The small amount did not last long, but it was enough. Just enough to stop the bleeding. Why are you helping me? Mako asked faintly into the sand, and Sasuke immediately responded for her. You don't need to know, so just shut your mouth so I don't have to hear your voice. Sakura nudged him for his harsh words. You sure have a lot to say today. And Sasuke blinked at her again in surprise. She was right. He was talking a lot, for him. He responded with another scoff. Sakura answered Mako's question despite Sasuke's threat. You believe in war. I believe in peace. We are stronger united than when we are divided. This is how I create peace. Sasuke wasn't following entirely, but he knew that Sakura was referencing words that had been exchanged between them, and Sasuke recognized them as the poison from a mindset consumed in darkness. Standing again, Sakura said, the hard part is going to be getting them all back to Sunagaku. What do you mean? Sasuke asked. They're drugged. Not all of them are dead. They'll wake soon, she clarified for him. Sasuke didn't even think before saying, I can remedy that. She ignored him, continuing, we might have to make a couple trips. How many can you carry? Sasuke didn't even respond to that ridiculous notion. Instead, he activated his Rinnegan once more, feeding it with the chakra from the chakra pill. A spiral appeared before them, revealing the central red dune dimension. Sakura didn't even have time to protest before Sasuke was throwing Mako's limp body inside the hole. What are you doing? Sakura asked, confused and stunned by his actions. They can remain in this dimension until we make it back to Suna. They can't flee inside. They have nowhere to go. Sakura nodded in understanding. Good idea. She praised him, obviously relieved she wasn't going to have to try to carry anyone with her arms practically useless. I'll take you to the others. A female kunoichi Sakura called Hisa was the second to be transported to Keigaya's center dimension. Then a different sort of being Sasuke considered warily. He didn't look to be human. Sakura explained that he had been the most dangerous of them all. Sakura believed him to be the ringleader, though she wasn't sure how many group members he truly led. It was still a confusing web of connections. Sakura left out the fact that this ninja must be the one to have damaged her arms, but no good would come from Sasuke demanding that she confirm that for him. The Uchiha made a mental note of it as he tossed the unconscious ninja inside, already contemplating on ways to make him talk. Is that all? He asked. One more, she replied, and she led Sasuke toward a small adobe house that he hadn't noticed before. It was alone in the desert, one wall completely destroyed, revealing the building's stark clay interior. Just before they reached the ruins, Sakura stopped when they approached the body of a large man. Sasuke was surprised to find this man not just unconscious, he was dead. He heard Isao. She defended automatically, ashamed that death had been necessary. But Sasuke didn't need an explanation from her. If she wouldn't have, Sasuke was pretty sure that he would have killed him. Let the sand have him, he declared, but Sakura shook her head. He belongs with them. They must be able to bury and grieve to find peace. We don't want to give them cause for any further resentment. Sasuke wanted to say, you can't be serious, but he didn't feel like arguing, because no matter what Sasuke could come up with to say next, Sakura would still be right in the end. She had a bigger vision in mind that Sasuke couldn't quite connect sometimes. He just knew that he would always trust her to do the right thing, even if it wasn't sensible, or in most cases, not what Sasuke would have done. Fine, he declared, opening the portal once more. His breathing became labored as he pushed the effects of the chakra pill. Like with the others, Sasuke dragged the man's body into the portal. Sasuke also stepped through, leaving the gateway open between realms. He directed his attention to Mako, ice already coding his next words. If I were you, I wouldn't wander too far from this spot. The dimension is endless and not of our world. You will only lose yourself and die in this place. Mako swallowed deeply in fear as he watched Sasuke's form from his stomach. On second thought, Sasuke sneered under his breath. Feel free. The portal closed behind the Uchiha as he exited. He would deal with all of them later, he thought. He needed to get Sakura back to Sunagaku first. Sakura couldn't help but whimper when her left arm wasn't responding as quickly to her healing chakra. Her right hand, the very same one she had shoved into Mako's mouth to keep him from screaming, had almost fully recovered as the medicine suppressing her chakra began to wear off and her healing abilities returned to her. Her left hand, however, was at first very numb, which Sakura knew was a very bad sign. But the longer she worked at healing, the more the pain began to intensify. It was almost unbearable, but Sakura was ultimately relieved at the burning sensation that indicated life. Sakura considered the differences between the two hands and all she could conclude was that distance must have had something to do with it since her right hand had grabbed the blackened sword at his feet and her left had been near his face when she plunged the needle in his neck. Sasuke supported her as they walked back to the sand village, though he suddenly seemed to her like he was the one that needed supporting. He stumbled in the sand and Sakura removed her good arm from his shoulders. I'm good. But are you okay? She asked, noticing his strenuous breathing for the first time. Yes, he fibbed, and Sakura knew it was a lie the minute he clutched his head to support it. Redirecting her chakra back to her healed hand, Sakura immediately sought out Sasuke's brow with her fingertips. He moaned with relief as green chakra lighted over it, but he instantly pushed her hand away. Heal yourself. What happened? She responded, ignoring his demand. She found his forehead again. There's nothing I can do if you don't tell me what's going on. I took 2 chakra pills. I'll be fine though. I just need rest. He removed her hand again. Sakura inhaled sharply at the confession. Why did you do that? I had already depleted my chakra reserves when I found out you weren't in the village. I panicked. Overdosing on chakra pills is one thing, she scolded, but using them recklessly to overexert your Rinnegan is another. No matter how much chakra you have limits with the Rinnegan. It was my only choice, he defended sharply, obviously masking his embarrassment with annoyance. Sakura placed her glowing palm over his eyes, now certain of the source of his discomfort. Sasuke made to move her hand away once more, but she fussed like a mother when he tried. Let me have my way, or we'll be here longer. Sasuke released a small laugh that sounded like another scoff. Only Team 7 could tell the difference between Sasuke's derisiveness and his sense of humor. Sakura couldn't believe he had the energy to laugh. But then something changed in the air around them and Sasuke grew very serious as he inhaled, the type of inhale someone made before having something important to say. Sasuke finally managed to grab her fingers and he tugged them away after Sakura was satisfied with his treatment. But he didn't let go. Instead, he held them for a moment that suggested tenderness. It was different from how their hands had brushed so many times before, like how they rested them against each other as they watched Suna's desert sunset. This time, it was more like how Sasuke had held her hand between them in the medicine preparation room. Finally working up the courage, Sasuke looked down at her feet and said, "I'm sorry." Sakura stared at the firm hold his fingers had on hers in wonder. And the truly amazing part was that he still wasn't letting go. "For what?" she whispered, not knowing what else to say for fear of him moving away. "For leaving you behind in Suna. For leaving in anger. For not being there and letting this happen." Sakura didn't let him continue. "Sasuke," she began, catching his guilty eyes with her own. "You don't have to worry about me anymore. I hope I have proved that to you, today. Please don't burden yourself with worry for me. I can carry my own burdens and some. You already have the weight of the world on your shoulders." Sasuke searched her eyes with his. Sakura knew this was a rare occasion. Not many people would see the Uchiha open, unguarded, with care etched in every feature of his expression. "I've been thinking," he said suddenly, still holding her fingers tightly, and Sakura felt the whole world suddenly still around them. Even the desert wind seemed to stop. Was this the Sasuke she had always known was inside, no matter how roughly he displayed himself to the world? "I'm sorry for what happened," Sakura interrupted, afraid for another impending denial of her feelings. She knew what was coming and she didn't want this small moment to end. "I won't do that again." He paused and Sakura wondered if he was unsettled by the open acknowledgement of her stolen kiss. He sighed and Sakura's stomach dropped. She felt him hesitate, saw it in his face. But he resolved himself, declaring, "I came to a conclusion while I was away, and I have to say this while I have the nerve." Sakura nodded, ready for disappointment. She was more afraid of what he would say next than she had ever felt going toe-to-toe with her enemies just moments ago. "Can it be enough for us to care for one another?" he asked, desperation cloaked with mock annoyance on his breath. "Can it just be enough for us to be friends as long as we are in each other's lives sometimes? Can it be enough for us to be united in the same goal?" Sakura's heart sank and unhappiness hit her like the wave she was expecting. Tears threatened to brim her eyelids, but Sakura swallowed them down. Would he ever not be this thick-headed and stubborn? Would he ever let them be what they could be? Whether or not Sakura was simply high on victory or if she was genuinely losing her meekness in Sasuke's presence, Sakura wasn't sure. She removed her hand from his. "Is it enough for you?" she finally asked, taking a step away from him. But he caught her fingers again, pulling her back gently to face him. "Is that a no?" he asked emotionlessly, but Sakura saw the struggle in his eyes. "When the answer becomes, yes, for you, I will accept it as mine as well." She pulled away, firmly this time. He couldn't respond. Sakura knew why. He wanted to put this on her. He was always putting it back on her, afraid, because of her, hesitant, because of her. These were his excuses, but Sakura wouldn't give him an out this time. It was his turn to choose. They both knew that it was far too late for Sasuke to pretend he didn't love her in the same way that Sakura loved him. But Sakura had learned that people love in many ways and not all people wanted to express that love romantically. Kissing Sasuke had been a mistake. She hated to call it that, but it was the truth of it. She didn't want to steal from him what he wasn't ready to give, what he wasn't at peace with. It was his turn. He now knew where she stood. When they finally made it back to the hidden sand village, Kankuro was there to intercept them just as Sasuke had expected he would. The puppet-wielding ninja was beside himself with worry at seeing Sakura's injuries, insisting that Sakura promptly return to the hospital. Sakura had insisted she tend to her own wounds back in their lodgings so she could rest. She immediately requested to see Isao, but Kankuro insisted she get some rest first. It wasn't until Sasuke insisted that he have an audience with him and Gaara, that he left Sakura to her own desires. As they parted, Sasuke tried to say something or grab her eyes with his, but she didn't look at him. Not even once. And Sasuke ran his hand exhaustedly through his hair. He couldn't think about them right now. A conference with the Cage would be the perfect distraction. Gaara, miraculously, had returned before he and Sakura had, and Sasuke wondered just how fast news could travel. Sasuke privately joked with himself that the desert shared its secrets with the Cage. The wind and sand must speak to him if he found out things so quickly. It was a hypothesis that could explain a lot at least. Sasuke shook his head as he followed Kankuro into the Cage's office. He must be getting delirious from the effects of the chakra pills. Sasuke, came Gaara's raspy acknowledgement when the Uchiha stepped into the room. Gaara was surprisingly alone, which relieved Sasuke. He thought he would have to face Gaara with the support of his council. It would be easier to speak of recent events if only Gaara and Kankuro were present. Sasuke nodded respectfully despite his feelings of resentment toward the two men at the moment for having let Sakura be kidnapped under their watch. As a ninja that was a part of this unpredictable shinobi world, Sasuke knew his anger was unjustified, but he wanted to be mad at anyone and everyone right now. 99% of his own anger was directed at himself, because Sasuke knew that he was more responsible for what happened than the Cage and his brother were. The Cage had been trying to be proactive and prevent something like this from happening. It just didn't turn out that way. The Cage seemed to share Sasuke's concern for discreetness, because he cloaked the room in sand as he had done the first day of Sasuke's arrival. It filled every crevice, thickening to soundproof the room. Sasuke opened the portal into Kagaya's central dimension without further delay. He walked into the vortex, not surprised the group remained exactly where he had left them. The only difference was that they were conscious, a fact that slightly irked the Uchiha. One by one, he grabbed each ninja, tossing them forward into the Cage's domain. Hisa clutched at her dead counterpart, holding onto the deceased brute. Sasuke found grim satisfaction in Mako's subdued, yielding persona. Being present before the Cage was far more terrifying than being stuck in a desolate dimension. But the individual that held both Sasuke and the Cage's attention was the wraith-like individual that bled darkness from a small spot on his neck. It was his only injury. Gaara carefully considered him, crossing his arms and surveying him emotionlessly as he did most enemies that he regarded. Darkness suddenly began to ooze from the man's eye sockets and Sasuke's temper suddenly flared. He looked to Gaara, and the ninja nodded his permission. Only demons don't seem to know when they're in the presence of other demons. Shall I show you hell? Sasuke's eye suddenly began to bleed as he formed the tiger seal for fire release. Amaterasu. The black flames clung to the phantom, incinerating what Sasuke realized was dark masses of sinewing, vaporized flesh. The phantom hissed, then screamed, then began to plead for mercy. Hisa began to cry and Mako turned his face away from their leader. Gaara came up beside Sasuke to speak to the wraith as he writhed. Sasuke released the Amaterasu and the flames receded. The Cage crouched, an arm on his knee. From one demon to another, I urge you to leave your shadows behind in hell and step out into the light. Only demons desire war, and war breeds more demons. Sasuke clutched his eye in silent suffering, and Gaara dismissed him. I'll handle the rest. I'll let you know what we find out. Sasuke nodded, not waiting for any further excuses to depart. He had delivered them into the Cage's care. But what those ninja didn't know was that Sakura's mercy held Sasuke more confined than it did the Cage, a demon just as he had said, whose territory had been breached. Sakura was finishing binding her tender left hand in medical bandaging, using up the last of her burn solvent that she had created at Suna's hospital, when Sasuke walked in. He opened the door, caught her eyes with his, and tried to hide the bloody track down his face from her with his hand. She was on her feet instantly, pulling him to the bed that he had staked his claim on. She felt his forehead and it was hot, too hot. He had done it this time. She sighed, summoning the small reserve of chakra behind the diamond mark on her forehead. She expected Sasuke to scold her for using what little she had left on him, but he didn't seem to notice in his extreme exhaustion. "Thank you," he whispered, and Sakura retreated to fetch water for him. He gulped it greedily and Sakura helped him shrug out of his outer layer of clothing. Sand fell from his hair and clothes in the same way hers had earlier. "I'm better now," he whispered, the first words spoken between them since their disagreement in the desert. Sakura nodded, making to move away, but he grabbed her hand for the third time that day. "Don't be angry," he begged, his exhaustion making him suddenly careless to conceal his true intentions with fake displeasure and irritation. "Why do you think I am angry?" she asked emotionlessly. "I just want what's best for you. I don't want to hurt you," he whispered in defeat. This side of Sasuke startled Sakura. He was becoming more undefended, open with emotions in a way she had never seen him before. Was it because he didn't have anything to hide anymore? Was he past his denials and his pretending? "I know," she squeezed his hand back. "But your concerns are groundless. Tell me how," he pleaded. She sat beside him on his bed, and he tilted his ear to her, never removing his hand from hers. She took a breath and told him the truth. Told him everything he needed to know. "I do not love you sacrificially, Sasuke. I do not choose you knowing that my life or happiness could be forfeit by doing so. I choose you because I can keep up with you. Because something like your absence wouldn't be enough to determine my permanent happiness. I will choose to go on, content with only the thought that I know you are out there somewhere loving me if that is all that I have in the moment." She took a breath and continued before he could respond. "I am strong enough to handle whatever comes my way as a result of loving you. And I have absolutely no doubts in my feelings, my happiness, and what I am willing to compromise to be with the person I love most." Sakura reached tenderly to turn his face to hers and their eyes met. She touched his forehead in the same way he had done to her many times before. "That person is you," she reassured him, offering him a sincere smile as she removed her hand from his forehead. Then Sasuke leaned forward, very close to her, and Sakura bit her lip to keep from reaching for his with her own. "Is all of that true?" he requested again, suddenly breathless. And Sakura knew later that it was just to be sure before what came next. "Yes," she breathed. And she didn't have to reach for him, because he was suddenly reaching for her. His hand found her chin and Sakura waited for his choice. She waited for him to move. And he did. "Then my answer is no, it's not enough for me either." When his lips carefully parted her own, Sakura knew without a doubt that he had decided to find some way possible for them, a path where he could choose her, too. In the moment that Sakura had asked him directly in the desert, "Is it enough for you?" Sasuke had known his answer in his heart. And when she turned away from him in the presence of Kankuro after their return hours earlier, the sight of her angry back made Sasuke realize it was the first time that he had ever seen it. Sasuke had practically begged for that confession, pleading for her to tell him how they could be together so he could justify the choice he had already made some time ago, justify choosing this despite all his many worries. Those words sung to his heart and caressed his concerns lovingly. He still gave her an out, asking, "Is all of that true?" And when she said, yes, it was Sasuke's final unraveling. That, yes, was the final reassurance that his stubbornness needed before he took hold of her chin. Unlike the kiss of his dream in the desert, Sasuke was careful, so careful when placing his mouth on hers. His fingers held her chin firmly while he took time to unite their mouths. As he did so, He braced himself despite his nerves and deepened the kiss. Sakura responded carefully as well, and Sasuke lifted his hand to touch her cheek in reassurance. To say, I want this. I've wanted this. But his fingers brushed wetness and Sasuke instantly broke away, startled at the tears he found running down Sakura's face. He searched her eyes with worry, immediately apologizing. Sorry. No, she smiled, grabbing hold of his receding face with her fingertips, and whispering, just happy. Sasuke wanted to sigh in relief because those tears had always been a sign that he had hurt her, but this time she was happy. She brought his mouth back to hers, not wanting it to be over, and Sasuke let her lead for just a moment. He forced himself to pull back despite the fire rising in his stomach. Maybe we should discuss, he began, anxiety creeping into his heart about what she was thinking, but Sakura's brightly lit face, that growing smile that spread to her eyes, stopped him. The laugh that came from Sakura sounded so sweet that Sasuke couldn't help but blushing. You want to talk. And she was right, Sasuke was a terrible talker. But when it came to this choice, he wanted to make sure they were on the same page, would be on the same page always. Sasuke and Sakura both knew Sakura would be making a lot of sacrifices by accepting this relationship between them. The least he could do was attempt to communicate his concerns, clarify their steps, ask questions and more. He couldn't afford to be reckless, not with her. Sasuke, Sakura whispered, leaning forward into him. He stiffened instinctually at her nearness but softened when her arms wound softly around his neck in a tearful hug. He accepted the embrace. Thank you, she whispered again, for giving us a chance. I promise I'll do everything to make you happy. He buried his face into her shoulder, his heart simultaneously full and broken by those familiar words. And for a moment, Sasuke forgot all his previous reasons and wondered why he had waited all of this time. If he had only held her sooner. Thank you, he repeated, as she pulled back to look at him, for everything. Sasuke decided not to waste any more time or words. They would find time to talk about this later. And for a second time, they came together hesitantly, each finding one another's lips with their own in the growing darkness of a moonless night. Sasuke didn't retreat again when she whispered his name against his own mouth. Just as much as he wanted to convince Sakura that he meant this, he also wanted to convince himself that this wasn't a reckless mistake he was making. Brazenly, even foolishly, he wanted to commit to it. And then a knock came at the door. And they both practically flew away from each other to opposite sides of the room. A smooth and uncomfortably familiar voice had both ninja blushing. Just letting the two of you know that me, and Naruto, will arrive first thing in the morning. The Cage requested a meeting a couple days ago and we were supposed to be there tonight, but as always, I will most likely be late. Thought it would be proper to give you two a heads up. There was an audible poof as the clone of their former sensei evaporated just beyond the door. Sakura raised her hand to cover her mouth, touch her lips, and gasp. Sasuke blushed and turned his back to her, contorting all emotions back into his controlled mask, embarrassed not only to be caught in such an act, but to have allowed them to be snuck up on by that old pervert of a ninja. And another thing, Kakashi hadn't even made the slightest effort in disguising his intentional warning. Even Sakura knew it. How did Kakashi guess that such a thing might be occurring between them if Sasuke, himself, hadn't planned for it to happen until just moments ago? How is he late? Sakura started to grin sheepishly, if his clone made it here at the designated time. Sasuke quickly glanced around at their location, noting the clothes on the floor, the shared room, themselves acting appropriately guilty. Sasuke didn't state the obvious. The sixth Hokage was stalling for them so they could do some rearranging. To keep Naruto in the dark for now. Sasuke walked quickly to the door, opened it, and scanned down the deserted hallway. There was nobody there. The Uchiha contemplated his next move. Should he leave? Go into Kagaya's dimensions and wait until tomorrow? Perhaps he should meet the Hokage and Naruto halfway, That way he and Sakura weren't seen together. Or should he toss all concern to the wind and just tell Naruto the truth? His former teammate had as much said they should be together, right? He had wished Sasuke that happiness verbally several weeks ago. Then why was this such a big deal? Two soft hands rested on the top of Sasuke's shoulders. You're overthinking this, aren't you? Sakura asked, leading Sasuke back away from the door and towards his bed. We are what we have always been, Sasuke. Friends on a mission together. Sasuke scoffed at her lack of worry about Naruto, and through Naruto, the whole Leaf Village finding out about this. He sat as she pressed down the front of his shoulders, gesturing for him to relax. You're not going anywhere tonight, so there's no use in worrying. Focus on resting and regaining your strength. Sakura. Rest. She shook her head. Doctor's orders. She retreated to her own sleeping spot without another word, settling down to rest. But Sasuke was certain she spent the rest of her night thinking about them, about the kissing and confessions, just as he did. Sakura had indeed spent the majority of the night in typical giddy fashion, replaying every second that she had only ever held in her desperate dreams. It had finally happened. Them. Sasuke had chosen them. Sakura wasn't foolish enough to allow her fantasies to run away with the images of a home that they shared, a family that they raised, the friends that surrounded them as they grew old together. Sakura knew exactly what would come as a result of their choice, a lonely and longing road. And Sakura was okay with that road because it was Sasuke and the world needed him. With her back to the Uchiha across the room, she touched her lips once more and felt the smile beneath her fingers. Eventually, she focused her chakra on her heart rate and induced her own slumber. A few hours before sunrise, Sakura's internal clock awakened her. She was far too conditioned by the relentless routine of the hospital back in Konoha to trick her body into sleeping longer, even after it still bore the extra lethargy of yesterday's events. Her left hand was still stiff and sore from the damage to her tissue, and she instinctively channeled her chakra to it, keeping a consistent stream traveling to the limb until it healed completely. Sakura was relieved that she had this healing ability because the type of destruction done to her skin would be irreversible for others. As she readied herself, wrapping the hand delicately in thick bandage, she snuck a shy glimpse over in the sleeping Uchiha's direction. Sasuke slept soundly, a possibility that she thought would not likely happen due to his constant tossing and turning of wakefulness. At least one of them was now getting some decent sleep. It was still too early to wake him, but Sakura had been reprimanded more than once now for taking advantage of his sleep to pursue other matters. Retrieving a small blank scroll from one of the many shelves in the room, Sakura wrote the sign for hospital on the inner flap. She placed it visibly on her bed before quietly slipping from the room. He needed rest, and she wasn't going to wake him. When she arrived at the hospital, all of her overnight patients were still fast asleep. A blurry-eyed medic greeted her warmly, expressing thankfulness for Sakura's safety as well as her shock about Hisa and Mako. Sakura exchanged pleasantries, not too keen to talk about the topic of either of those two traitors. Her mind wandered to someone else, a child she desperately wanted to see. When Sakura reached Isao's mental health ward, she gently peeked through the crack. To her surprise, Isao was wide awake, sitting cross-legged in the dark of his room. Miss Haruno, he whispered loudly, immediately recognizing her. Isao? Sakura questioned as she stepped through the door, did your night terrors keep you from sleeping again? Did you not take your medicine? But the child didn't answer her. Instead, he bolted off the bed and grabbed her around the waist. He cried into her stomach, sobs shaking his injured body. I thought you might be dead. He whimpered, I thought you were gone, like her, like my mom. Sakura fell to her knees and embraced the child carefully, cursing herself for not checking in on him sooner despite Konkuro's assurances. With her trained medical eye, Sakura immediately noticed the thick bandages that encompassed his ribs. She didn't realize that Sasuke was the only one she needed to reassure about her position in the world. You don't have to worry about me, Isao. Nothing can take me away from this life. I'm not going anywhere. You promise? He wailed, his voice muffled in the space between Sakura's shoulder and neck. Yes, she assured, holding him out at arm's length to assess him more carefully. Besides a wound to his arm and a broken rib or two, it seemed he was going to be all right. You should be proud of yourself. Sakura lifted his chin. You fought by my side. You made it back. You did it with injuries, too. I think you have what it takes to be a great ninja. Really? He asked, wiping the streams of liquid from his eyes. Yes, she assured him. And I have great news. He smiled up at her in excited anticipation. What news? My friends are on their way. They'll escort you back to the Leaf Village. Dot 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 dot. After Sakura rewrote the 2 letters addressed to the Kazekage and Hokage that Mako had confiscated after drugging her, Sakura made her way towards the Kazekage's central tower. The sun began to rise in the east, mixing with the night to create that beautiful ombre sunrise of orange-blue-pink that belonged to this desert. In her current state of high spirits, Sakura thought that maybe the sun had gotten closer, warming the day and her skin like the sunrays after a long and laborious winter. But she knew it wasn't really the sun approaching closer and closer every day, but instead, it was a person who had finally reached the season of spring in his life and opened his heart to a summer. Sakura beamed and took a moment to appreciate this monumental sunrise. Sakura-chan. It was also special because it was the sunrise that would accompany the rest of Team 7's arrival. Sakura turned to see the orange and black-clad figure of that heartwarming voice barreling towards her, a grin that occupied half of his face, and a hand that waved back and forth. He ran and ran until he was just before her, leaning forward over his knees. Sakura had developed a habit of hugging her blonde friend recently, and she didn't hesitate to do so again this time, squeezing him so tightly that her blonde shinobi's face turned blue from her superhuman strength of a hug. I'm so glad to see that you're safe. Can't breathe. Sakura, Naruto choked out. Sakura couldn't help herself. Pinpricks of tears accompanied her smile. She had loved her time traveling with Sasuke, but apart from Sasuke, Naruto was one of the only people in this world that made her feel like home away from home, and she had missed him. And then Kakashi was there, raising his own familiar, hand sign, dragging along an equally disinterested Shikamaru, whose attitude was the complete opposite than it was when Tamari usually led him through the adobe buildings of Suna. After releasing Naruto, Kakashi was there placing a compassionate hand on her shoulder, a gesture that he used to do regularly when she was a genin. I'm proud of you. And those words meant the entire world. Gaara, Naruto yelled to the person who had come up behind her. Long time no see. And the warm expression that the Kazekage returned to his friend from another village, revealed to Sakura that Naruto was that person for others, too. Kakashi had had a rather amusing night, devising a plan to keep both Shikamaru and Naruto delayed in their journey. All it took was a stall in the form of a competition, which was really simple to do actually. Kakashi had jokingly remarked that out of the 3 of them, he could outsleep both lazy ninja because he, of course, was the Hokage and the laziest among the 3. The rules were simple. During their hour break of rest, Kakashi would summon a clone to supervise them while they rested, monitoring who would naturally wake up first. Naruto yelled, "You're on!" and ran 10 miles at his highest speed to tire himself out enough that he would sleep soundly through the hour. Whether or not Shikamaru was smart enough to see through Kakashi's plan, he didn't argue, lounging backward in the sand on the border of the country of wind, and crossing an arm lazily over his eyes. If Kakashi had a large sum of money, he would make a bet here and now that Shikamaru would win this. After his 2 counterparts were open-mouthed, and drool bubbling, Kakashi sent away his clone with a head nod. It disappeared into the setting sun toward the sand village. Then Kakashi waited, enjoying a night of stars while reading his beloved Ika Ika Paradise by firelight. This was more like it, he thought to himself, glad to be unburdened by the demanding lifestyle of the Hokage. When Gaara had requested a meeting via carrier bird, Kakashi's brow had furrowed at first to learn about Sakura's situation, along with the enemy she and Sasuke had encountered on their journey. The Kazekage requested that he or someone close to him report to Tsunagaker. And then Kakashi had pinched his chin in careful thought as he admired the surmounting pile of paperwork on his desk. Want to go on a trip? He had asked Shikamaru, who nodded off at his position. Not really, Shikamaru responded disinterestedly. Kakashi baited, I guess I could take Naruto with me to meet with the Kazekage, instead. The Kazekage? He probed, a trip to Tsunagaker. Yes, he stretched, unfurling the scroll he received from Gaara, so that Shikamaru could take a better look from afar. It seems there are some foreign shinobi causing problems for Sakura. Shikamaru pondered, coming to read the offered scroll over Kakashi's shoulder. It'll be a drag, but I guess I can go. Don't want anything to happen to Sakura. Kakashi thought to himself. Because of Sakura. That wasn't the kunoichi on Shikamaru's mind. Kakashi realized suddenly that he was too involved in all the lives of this young generation. How did he always find himself knowing too much? Then it's settled. Kakashi nodded, snapping the scroll back into its rolled-up position. And then the door of his office was practically kicked through. I'm still going, Naruto announced, startling both Kakashi and Shikamaru as he announced his obvious eavesdropping. If Sakura is in danger, then I'd better be there. And that's how Kakashi ended up with two knuckleheads on a week vacation to the Sand Village. And then Kakashi's logical next thought had been of the other two members of Team 7. He had been ecstatic when he learned that Sakura had temporarily accompanied the Uchiha on his lifelong mission and that Sasuke had let her. Years of reading makeout tactics informed Kakashi of what was to become between the pair, a natural progression of suppressed feelings over the course of many years. Most of the time, there was only one outcome if a male and female shinobi embarked on a long journey together. Sending the clone was a precaution, just in case his suspicions were correct, and their unexpected drop-in might cause a stir. But Kakashi had never expected to walk in on that. When the clone disappeared and the events that his clone just witnessed dropped into his memory, Kakashi laughed quietly to himself under the stars. He grinned up at those same luminaries for a moment, grateful that both of his ninja pupils had finally navigated their way to one another through the murk of life and had decided to take on that life together. Sasuke had finally let her in, and the knowledge felt like the Uchiha had come home again. Well done, Sakura. Naruto may have brought him home, but what you have done is shown him a path to his own special happiness. The sixth Hokage had lounged back into the grass, placing his open book over his eyes. He didn't wake Shikamaru and Naruto when the hour expired, after all. And to his surprise, when the other two ninja woke him the next morning, Kakashi had won the competition. Sasuke stepped out of his portal just in front of the Kazecage's building, anticipating the cringy reception he would receive from Kakashi and Naruto once he reached Gaara's office. He took his time climbing the steps. When he entered the room, the Uchiha quietly leaned back against the far wall to avoid interrupting the conversation that was already occurring. Essentially, we are asking for the Leaf's cooperation with us as we search Tanagaker for the enemy's whereabouts, the Kazekage announced from behind his desk. It is a territory between our villages, and it would be best if both village personnel were present during searches, so it seems more diplomatic to the citizens of Tanagaker. The white-haired ninja nodded, Naruto voicing his sensei's unspoken response. Of course, the Leaf will work with you, Gaara. Isn't that right, Kakashi-sensei? Kakashi pinched the bridge of his nose with a sigh. Can't you at least call me Lord Hokage when we are on official business? Naruto ignored him and announced. If they're going after Sakura, then of course we will help. I'll go find them myself. Sasuke shook his head in withdrawn amusement at his teammates' old habits of needing to be the center of attention in literally every setting. Sasuke's eyes also found Sakura, who stood at the front of the party, tapping her foot impatiently. She clutched 2 letters to her chest and Sasuke sensed that she was waiting for an opportunity to interject, little to no concern about this topic. Sasuke smirked. She couldn't care less about some target on her back by shinobi that belonged to the same group she had already gone head-to-head with. If they can't be found, a spiky ponytailed ninja remarked, and Sasuke quickly identified his childhood classmate, Shikamaru. Then wouldn't it be better to draw them out? They are after Sakura after all. We could just wait for them to strike again. Sasuke frowned. He didn't like that idea. Shikamaru had never been one of Sasuke's favorites, and the Uchiha liked him considerably less whenever he made suggestions about using his friends as bait. Genius he may be, but Sasuke didn't have to like him or his ideas. I'm sure we can think of something, Kakashi thought out loud, drawing the eyes of the room in his direction. While you're thinking about it, Sakura finally spoke, handing both Kakashi and Gaara each one of the letters she held. I would like to request both of your considerations regarding a matter concerning a young boy here in Sunagaku. He's been through a lot, and he expresses interest towards starting anew in the Leaf Village. Kakashi and Gaara both surveyed the letters in their hands, and Sasuke could see even from where he stood that the reports were extensively detailed. Once again, Sasuke found himself admiring his teammate's professional persona who seemed like a different person altogether. He has expressed the desire to train as a shinobi, but I also want him to continue treatment at the Children's Health Clinic in Konoha. I am requesting that he be released by Sunagaku into Konoha's care until the child decides he's ready to return. I'll talk with my council, but I approve as long as the Leaf is willing, Gaara agreed, glancing over at Kakashi to assess his reaction. Of course, that's okay, said Kakashi, beaming over at Sakura. However, some people in the Leaf might harbor negative sentiments toward the youth for various, equally ridiculous reasons. He might be accused of things like being a spy, might be shunned, and more. Can he handle situations like this? Sasuke watched Sakura carefully weigh Kakashi's words. There was a shadow of worry that crossed her face for just a second and then Naruto was elbowing her. I'll keep an eye on him. How can you be in Tanagaku looking for Sakura's aggressors and be in Konoha too? Shikamaru began but then trailed off as he held everyone's dumbfounded gazes. Never mind. I'm not on my game today. I'm obviously overworked. They all let out a laugh because everyone knew exactly how Naruto would do it with his infamous shadow clone jutsu. I'm certain Isao will be okay, but any time you can spare him, would be great, Naruto. Being around you would do him some good, Sakura said and everyone around the room nodded in agreement. Even Sasuke agreed silently to himself in the back. Being around Naruto had changed each and every person in this room, including himself. He can travel back with us when we leave, Kakashi announced, and Sakura grinned in success. Gaara quickly changed the topic back to the most pressing matter at hand. We have Sakura's assailants in custody. I'd like all your personal evaluations of them as shinobi. Everyone in the room nodded, and the cage turned to Kankuro. Take them to the prison. Sakura, if you don't mind, I'd like to discuss something with you in more detail. Sasuke's ears pricked at the mention of her staying behind. But his rational self reasoned that it was likely just to talk about the events of yesterday. Uchiha can further explain who they are while Sakura and I finish up, right Sasuke? Gaara asked towards Sasuke's direction without even looking up from the paperwork on his desk, both revealing Sasuke's presence to his fellow Leaf shinobi and volunteering him to work. Annoying sand guy. Of course, they all spun at the mention of his name, locating him against the far wall. He didn't wave or smile, but just crossed his arms in typical Uchiha fashion. While Naruto was practically leaping toward him, shouting, There you are, Sasuke. Sasuke couldn't help but catch Sakura's eye, and the Uchiha stiffened at the obvious embarrassment that flashed across her face for the briefest of seconds before she shyly looked away. And even when his loser of a best friend was wrapping his arm around Sasuke's neck in an annoying way of showing affection, Sasuke didn't miss the fact that Kakashi also noticed Sakura's display, and Sasuke caught his sensei's knowing expression as the Hokage looked back and forth between the two with one smiling eye. Sasuke sighed. They were screwed. Watching her friends exit through the doorway of the Cage's office, Sakura couldn't help but feel relieved as the rest of Team 7 and Shikamaru trailed behind Sasuke and Kankuro to the Sand Village prison. Sakura's cheeks were still a little red, taken by surprise at Sasuke's unexpected appearance just now. Sakura mentally berated herself for the flushed reaction, especially after rehearsing in her head all morning how she would come off much more composed during their reunion after the whole kissing thing last night. She had matured a lot from her genin days, and was usually very collected around her peers now, except Naruto, maybe, who sometimes brow out her temper, but seeing Sasuke assessing her own reaction with a certain white-haired sensei's watchful, knowing eye had Sakura acting like her schoolgirl self again. She cringed at her own embarrassed behavior. Suddenly, the Cage's voice brought her back to the matter at hand. Even though it is not ideal, there's some logic behind Shikamaru's suggestion. Sakura nodded, remembering her friend's proposition regarding the anti-peace group targeting Sakura for her mental health-centered endeavors. Shikamaru had offered a solution to their dilemma on finding the rest of the group's members, but it involved using Sakura as a lure for her enemies. It's not that Sakura was opposed to the idea, she wasn't worried in the slightest, actually. She was just annoyed with the problem at hand. She was making progress here in the sand with the mental health clinic, and she was reluctant to put that on hold while she dealt with these war-focused sociopaths. At least, she told herself that if she were to draw them out, she wouldn't have to go looking for them in Tanagakure, but she had another concern regarding that. She voiced this concern to Gaara, saying, drawing such a crowd into your village might pose a risk to the citizens here. He shook his head thoughtfully at that, and Sakura wondered why Gaara might be willing to take such a risk all in the name of her safety. If anything, it would be more appropriate for Konoha to take such an action since she was a leaf shinobi, after all. Or was it really her safety that inspired Gaara to do so? They were able to infiltrate here through the clinic, which I take personal responsibility for. It's not in my nature to overlook such an offense so easily, and I believe I owe this to you as an apology for failing to keep you safe. Gaara's rasping voice faded away as he assessed her reaction, and Sakura saw a faint ember of emotion in his typical stoic eyes that accompanied the apology. She found herself blushing for the second time as she reassured him that everything was fine and that it was her fault for leading them here from Tanagakure in the first place. When she brought up Tanagakure, Gaara interjected, if we settle the matter within my country, we would be sparing Tanakagure from getting involved more than they already have. They have not taken too kindly to our investigative presence the last 24 hours. I thought that involving Konoha would make it seem more diplomatic, but Shikamaru's suggestion might be best. We don't want another situation on our hands where a small country is caught between two nations. Sakura nodded again at the Cage's rationale, acknowledging the truth and importance of his words. I'm willing to do anything I can to help, she finally declared, already wondering how she would manage to entice them here. Let's think it over more carefully and discuss it more tomorrow, he said, relaxing into the chair behind his desk. We have discovered a couple of leads that we need to explore, and thinking of a plan will take some time. Meanwhile, I'd like to ask your opinion on something. Okay, Sakura responded, making to sit in the chair Gaara indicated with his hand across from the desk. A part of her wanted to grill the Cage for more details about the group in Tanagakure, so she could know the ins and outs about those who wanted to target her, but Sakura also believed that the shadow being she had gone up against was most likely the scariest of them all to face, so she wasn't too worried about the details. And if Gaara didn't offer her more information than that, then he was probably holding back for official related reasons. So, she let it go. We also talked about a mental health treatment for adults as well as children. Should we begin with those you've captured and brought to me? Sakura blinked at such a statement as she recalled her conversation with the cage as they strolled together along the sun-lit avenues of sand toward the villages in trance a few days ago. It has been an inaccuracy to think that only children could suffer, Sakura had said to Gaara. What if we included adults in our mental health program, too? Gaara must have taken the proposition very seriously at the time, considering how quickly he was choosing to take action towards such a goal. Sakura couldn't help but hesitate in response to Gaara's sudden proposition. Could someone like her really get through to those people, the people she had gone toe-to-toe with in the desert, the very people who had set out to kill her for the sole reason of her mental health efforts? She wasn't sure. "I'll be there," came the hoarse reassurance of the sand-wielding cage before her. Seeds of hope suddenly embedded themselves within her heart of doubt. "I'll help you start." Sakura nodded, offering the cage a smile of gratitude. Just before they had viewed the sunset together, Sakura had meant the words she had told Gaara in response to the question of who would be best to help people in need. "Like you, Lord Cage." Even though Sakura silently pondered how Gaara had the availability to help her begin this process, Gaara had the same noble way as Naruto of making others believe in him. Sasuke sneered beyond Naruto's shoulder as his friend knelt before the sand-encased jail cell containing one of Sakura's attackers. They had separated him from the other two, all of whom Sasuke had transported via Kagaya's dimensions back into the sand village. Sasuke knew Naruto's hands itched in the same way his did as they both witnessed Mako's silent interrogation. The medic revealed very little as soon as renowned questioner sat before him just on the other side of the bars, ticking off questions one by one. "How did you manage to subdue the medical kunoichi known as Sakura Haruno?" the investigator asked without skipping a beat. "I drugged her. Isn't that already obvious?" came Mako's taut and honest reply. It was as good enough as any confession as far as Sasuke was concerned, so what was the point of continuing this charade of a civil investigation? Sasuke knew it was morally wrong to skip necessary processes and jump straight to the physical force required to extract the information he wanted, but it was hard to kick old habits of thinking. The questioning continued. "You expect us to believe that you were able to drug an elite medical ninja without assistance? Who helped you sedate her and what was the method used?" Mako let out a small derisive laugh that had the Uchiha narrowing his eyes lethally in the traitor's direction. "You're overestimating her. All I did was pretend to be her colleague and slip something into her drink. Someone who desperately wants a friend isn't difficult to deceive." Mako's declaration did two things for Sasuke. First, it was like a heavy stone dropped in Sasuke's heart, for he felt so terribly guilty about his and Sakura's falling out immediately post-kiss in the medicine preparation room 2 nights ago. Had Sasuke left her feeling so eager for kindness that she had dropped her guard? These same words also ignited a rage so savage within the Uchiha that he felt like stepping through a portal, just to stand on the other side of these bars, inches away from the man who had the audacity to say that about Sakura. Sasuke smirked when Naruto's angry voice echoed throughout the jail from his place beside the Uchiha. "Drugging Sakura was that last thing you'll ever do, you bastard." Sasuke was somewhat relieved that his friend was getting worked up, too, and had actually spoken Sasuke's mind for him. "Calm down, Naruto," Kakashi stated predictably, and Sasuke wanted to roll his eyes at his sensei's typical level-headed lecturing. "You too, Sasuke," Kakashi ordered next, placing hands on both of their shoulders. "The last thing we need is for either of you to get involved in this personally." Sasuke wanted to flash his sensei an affronted look for even comparing him to his loser best friend or suggesting that he was getting angry on Sakura's behalf, but Sasuke dropped the pretense. What was the point of pretending he wasn't just as pissed as Naruto? The Uchiha's annoyance was visibly displayed on his face in colors of red and purple. He so desperately wished Mako would turn in his direction, catch his Sharingan and spiral into the memory-searching genjutsu Sasuke had prepared for him. He would find the answers without all this unnecessary time wasting. But Sasuke knew that Mako knew better than to search him out. He had witnessed what Sasuke had done with Sato in the hospital room to learn just what he needed to know about Isao, the child Sakura cared for. Again, Naruto voiced both their thoughts by arguing, "We are already personally involved. He drugged our teammate. She's one of us. The least we should do is teach this guy a lesson." Sasuke breathed in agreement, surprising himself for allowing the sound to reveal his own private thinking. When Kakashi, Shikamaru, and Naruto looked over at him in surprise, Sasuke decided to further add, "We need to find out where the other ninja of this group are. It appears to me that Sakura accomplished that herself." Naruto, Shikamaru chimed in, pointing out the wounds still not fully healed on the young traitorous medic. "We'll get the information soon enough." After the interrogator jotted down a few private notes on the table between him and Mako, the green-haired man pushed the round frames of his glasses back up the bridge of his nose as he made eye contact with Mako again. "Where is the rest of your group?" "There isn't any more. You've apprehended all who were a part of it," Mako replied immediately. Then the green-haired investigator sighed, pulling his glasses off in irritability. "I despise liars. I have methods of making you talk. Otherwise, I wouldn't have this job. But the cage, he is the only thing between you and my preferred methods of interrogation. Why would the cage hold back against this scum?" Sasuke thought silently to himself. This fake had infiltrated Gaara's village who knows how long ago, targeted the mental health clinic Sakura had helped establish here, posed as a caring and concerned medic, earned everyone's trust, and betrayed Sakura at just the right time. "I'm not lying," Mako seethed. The green-haired man, who Sasuke grew to like more and more as he questioned Mako, narrowed his eyes and leaned across the table and said, "I'll let you in on a secret. Do you really think that the cage does not have all the answers to these questions? Why then, do you think I'm wasting my time questioning you? Think really hard, I'm sure you're capable of figuring it out." And with that whispered revelation, Sasuke couldn't help but review Kankuro's words from yesterday in his mind. With unmentionable methods, we were able to find out who their target was. Did this mean that Gaara already knew how many were in the group from an interrogation that Gaara had conducted back in Tanagakure? Naruto snickered loudly at the divulgement of the cage's secret, interrupting Sasuke's thoughts, and Sasuke noticed that Mako couldn't help but locate the blonde-haired Jinchuriki who observed him. Mako's face turned slightly white as he realized for the first time who exactly had been making so much noise outside his cell. Sasuke noted his fear of Naruto as a good thing and smirked when Mako made a point of dropping his gaze and locating Sasuke's figure next, eyes trained solely on his legs. Mako's fear of him was even better. "Have you figured it out yet?" the interrogator asked, laughter in the question. Mako's eyes widened suddenly, not because he had solved anything, but because the cage was suddenly there in the flesh, standing beside the green-haired ninja with a palm on his shoulder. "Enough, Kizumo. Let's stop here." Glancing back at the cage, the green-haired ninja sighed and let the pen he was holding drop and roll across the notepad on the table in frustration at having his job cut short. "We will take care of this one," the cage rasped, gesturing to newly formed entrance at the back of the sand-bodied cell. "Go and see what you can learn from the shade. Don't touch him but do what you need to do." A wicked smile replaced the disappointed frown on Kizumo's face. "I won't have to touch him, Lord Cage." And with that, he exited hurriedly through the hole in the wall that Gaara had formed. But Sasuke was hung up on the word Gaara had used at the beginning of his command to Kizumo, We will take care of this one." Just as Sasuke had that thought, his stomach dropped when his pink-haired teammate entered the cell through the hole as well, Gaara gesturing for her to take the seat across from Mako that Kizumo had just vacated. Sasuke was certain that the same frown he now wore, not only occupied his own face at seeing Sakura face the man who had betrayed her, but Naruto's and Kakashi's as well. Punch his face in, Sakura. Naruto called to her from the other side of the cell, and Sakura turned to find him. She smiled at Naruto, reassuring him that all was okay. She found Sasuke's multicolored eyes next, lingered on them for half a second, before turning back to Mako. Sakura shuffled the papers in a yellow file that Gaara had given her to look through before they came to Suna's prison. The papers contained many details about Mako, his activity within the village, and his alleged backstory. Every non-Suna-born citizen has a special documentation file, Gaara had relayed casually as they descended the steps into the underground sand-constructed prison, with information regarding their activity and how they came to be here. It might not be much use since it's mostly filled with his lies, but I figured if anyone could discern anything valuable, you might. I'll try, Sakura had assured him, flipping through the record carefully as they walked. In truth, the file didn't contain much out of the ordinary, or what she would expect for Mako. He had come to the village a year ago, claiming to be from a small island asking to join the medic team, claiming to be a part of the elite medic unit in Tanagakure and would like to learn from the medical advancements here. Unsuspicious of an individual hailing from a non-ninja nation, Gaara saw Mako's knowledge of medicine as an asset and granted his request, offering Mako a place and lodging. His activity was also unremarkable as he spent the last year learning from medical staff Sakura had helped train. Hisa, unexpectedly, did not have a file. In fact, she had managed to somehow infiltrate the village secretly, and Sakura suspected that Mako had succeeded in smuggling her in. Sakura wasn't surprised that Gaara addressed this topic with Mako first. You smuggled your counterpart inside the village via the medical trade route, am I correct? When receiving medical supplies from Tanagakure, an advanced medical country, she came with and was disguised as someone with a position in the building. Is any of that wrong? The examination was calm, unthreatening, just as if Gaara had been talking to Kankuro or Tamari. The way he phrased the questions revealed that Gaara had already figured this particular scenario out. Mako kept his eyes down, focusing on the file in Sakura's hands. She guessed that he was evaluating its thickness carefully, determining just how much information about him and his company conspirators was already contained within. Would he bothering lying in the cage's face, Sakura wondered. If you're going to end up killing me, just get on with it, Mako replied behind clenched teeth, his silence about Hisa revealing Gaara had been correct in his guesswork. And to Sakura's surprise, sand began to spiral at Mako's feet and in just a few seconds, it reached up to form manacles around the imposter's wrists, jerking them back behind the chair so that he was properly restrained. If that is your wish, Gaara responded calmly to Mako's now wide-eyed expression of fear. The path of life you have currently chosen will lead to your death anyway. Large heaps of sand began to fall from the ceiling around Mako, filling the room rapidly with sand like a tipped upside-down hourglass. Creating an invisible barrier across the cement table between them, Gaara allowed the sand to crash down around the conspirators so that only Mako's side of the sand-bodied interrogation room began to rise around his feet like water in a cave during high tide. Sakura's heart felt like it was going to beat out of her chest. The room buzzed loudly, and sand whipped through Sakura's hair as the grains were summoned in Mako's direction. Gaara's voice was still intense enough to be heard despite his overall composure and the humming of the sand as if this very room was designed to emphasize it. My sand delights at the blood of others and I've killed many before you. Since you have volunteered your life, it eagerly accepts. Mako began to shift anxiously as the sand reached his shoulders and he bit his bottom lip in steely resolve to quiet his quickened breathing and accept his fate. Gaara's slow voice continued, when someone chooses a life of darkness, a life of hatred and evil, and puts their life on the line for a cause accomplished through darkness, they are only marching towards an inevitable death. Sakura glanced over at Gaara in concern as the sand billowed like a wave around Mako's chin, and Mako leaned his head back and strained his neck above it, gasping for the last few breaths of oxygen belonging to him in this world. Why so? Gaara asked, composed and relaxed despite the struggling man before him. Because you have pit yourself against those who share a stronger vision, one of peace and hope and love. Naturally, the odds will be against you. Stop, came Mako's desperate voice at last, sand knocking against the sides of his head. Please, stop. Do you choose life? Gaara asked Mako, and the long subdued tears began to spill over the rims of his eyelids. Yes, he cried, but the sand did not stop ascending around him. I said yes. Don't kill me. Make it stop. Not good enough. Which life do you choose? Gaara probed, crossing his arms over his chest in resolve to wait for the answer he wanted. A peaceful, Mako whimpered, sand choking off the words as it filled his throat. Gaara watched him thrash for just a moment, and Sakura tried desperately to hold herself back despite the cage's hesitation. She had chosen to trust the cage as someone to align herself with for the sake of the lives almost lost to an all-consuming darkness. He wanted to help them just as much as her. These corrupt ninja were not children as Sakura was used to. She would trust Gaara's judgment. Finally, the sand relented, ascending once more into the air to reconstruct the ceiling above the jail cell. And as Mako coughed violently, rubbing sand from his eyes and ears, Gaara made a final statement that made Sakura realize that only Gaara would be the savior of these ninja. Rather than a life of loneliness, we surround ourselves with evil people. Such a life is worse because you will lose your soul to the hatred within you, no longer caring for the feeling of camaraderie, and you might as well be dead anyway. Mako sat in his chair gasping like a beached ocean creature that waited for death on a bed of sand. I too was like you, Gaara announced, voice softening as he recalled the sand from Mako's lungs and hair. Until someone extended a hand in friendship. Gaara gestured over his shoulder to Naruto, who grinned heartily and rubbed the back of his neck shyly at Gaara's recognition of him. Can you take over from here, Sakura? Gaara asked her, and she nodded, watching the cage's back as he turned in Naruto and Kakashi's direction. When the sandbars of the cell disintegrated as he passed through them, Sakura once again found herself grateful to be considered a friend of Gaara's and not an enemy. She had faced him head-on once before, and was thankful every day afterward that Naruto had extended that hand of friendship to his fellow Jinchuriki. Come with me, Gaara said to the waiting leaf ninja, there's another ninja you need to see. He possesses an ability like yours, Shikamaru. Kakashi and Shikamaru immediately followed the cage, and Naruto lingered for a moment, offering a hesitant look back at Sakura as he was conflicted at being summoned away from her. The blonde ninja glanced back over to Sasuke, who seemed to be content just where he was as he perched himself against the wall just across from Mako's cell, eyes closed as if he were settling to doze. Naruto rushed to Gaara's side once he was certain Sasuke planned to stay behind. When Sakura turned back to Mako, he was rubbing his wrists where Gaara's sand had bound him. He chose not to look at the pink-haired medic he had betrayed, instead shamefully focusing back on the table between them. He shifted painfully, and Sakura noted for the first time that blood ran in tendrils down to his feet from his previously sustained injuries Sakura had yet to heal. Standing, she made her way around to Mako's back, lifting the material around the stab wound to assess it. Mako hissed in pain as the material lifted from the wound. What are you doing? He murmured. Healing you fully, she explained, rolling up the back of his shirt against Mako's stiffening protest. Don't, he said weakly as Sakura tugged the shirt the rest of the way up and over his head. Save your strength. You'll need it. She frowned at the wound that now festered from incomplete treatment. At some point in his capture and detainment, Mako had reopened the wound. Sakura had only staunched the bleeding with her chakra immediately after rendering the other two of her enemies unconscious on the desert battlefield, and now the skin puckered with redness and swelling. Why is that? Sakura asked calmly, already predicting his next answer. There's more of them waiting, he whispered quietly, so that not even Sasuke, who indignantly peeked at them under thick eyelashes, could overhear. They'll come for you. Summoning the green chakra to her fingertips despite his warning, Sakura pressed her fingers to the open rip in Mako's flesh and he gasped. Why do you tell me this? She asked him. Have you really chosen to seek a new life of peace like you promised the cage? Or was that a lie just to save your own neck? Once they find me, and realize I have betrayed the cause, they'll kill me anyway, Mako whispered again. The cage has shown me mercy, but they will not. I cannot choose a life of peace even if I wish it. Sakura frowned, glancing over the top of his dark head of hair to admire Sasuke from a distance. Sasuke had been able to choose peace because he had the support of others. As did Gaara. This meant that they both had friends who were willing to go against the world in order to protect their choices to start over. Mako didn't have that. Why did you join them? Do you really believe that there needs to be hatred and war circulating throughout the ninja world? Sakura asked him honestly, chakra sputtering and dying as she suddenly ran empty. Her breathing quickened as a headache began to form at her temples. She cursed internally at her low supply of chakra. She needed more rest. She still hadn't fully recovered from the battle, had used what chakra she had possessed healing Isao this morning, and was also consistently feeding a stream of chakra to her injured hand. The freshly healed wound on Mako's back was enough to reassure her despite the strain. At least he was restored. I needed a place in this world. Their vision made sense to me. Sakura nodded, returning to the chair exhaustedly. She closed Mako's file and said, You had a place. You have a place. His eyebrows raised, as he mentally processed what she was suggesting. We need you, she said to him, emotion thickening her already tired voice. I need you, by my side in the mental health clinics when I'm here, and running things in my place when I'm not. I've never had such a competent partner before. Mako stared back at her and Sakura saw the confliction in his eyes. How can you say that to someone who betrayed you? I drugged you. I had every intention of handing you over to them to do as they wished. This was true, and the reality of it twisted in her heart. However, Mako had also refused to let Hisa kill her, insisting that she was too valuable to kill right away. Everyone deserves a second chance, she smiled, making to stand behind the table. Forgiveness is how we will manage to create a peaceful world. Mako looked down at his feet again as Sakura turned back toward the hole in the wall that Gaara had morphed into existence. Her head was throbbing terribly now, and Sakura massaged her eyes. Okay, Mako said to Sakura's retreating form, and Sakura turned back just before reaching the exit. If I somehow make it out of this alive, I'll do it. I'll help you with the mental health clinics. I'll help you achieve peace. In return for your forgiveness, I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Sakura blinked at Mako, feeling somewhat comforted by the fact that even though he had betrayed her and did some terrible things, he still had goodness in him. Sakura hadn't entirely been fooled by Mako because he was still someone worthy of forgiveness. Deal, Sakura nodded, taking the last step from his cell and entering a small sand tunnel that would eventually connect her back to the main stairway. As if on cue of her exiting, the tunnel closed itself off behind her, leaving Mako to take the first mental steps toward a new life. As soon as the wall had sealed her away from Mako, Sasuke was there, reaching for her as she leaned against the wall to hold her head. Sakura jumped when his hand found her upper arm, surprised at his sudden appearance. Sasuke, she breathed, trying to smile despite the pain. You shouldn't be wasting your chakra teleporting carelessly. Sasuke scoffed as he forced her to sit against one of the tunnel walls. You're one to talk, he chastised, summoning a little chakra to the palm of his only hand. Draining the last of your chakra healing lying snakes like that one. How annoying. She laughed nonchalantly and Sasuke wrapped his glowing hand around the back of her neck, focusing what healing powers he possessed to the center of her nape, pushing the chakra up into her skull. As Sasuke had watched her with Mako, the Uchiha had detected a drop in her chakra signal and saw her hand reach up to touch her eyes. He had known in that very moment that she had wasted what little chakra she had left on that bastard. After a second, she pushed against Sasuke's elbow weakly, signaling him to stop. That's plenty. Sasuke ignored her, pressing his fingers gently into her skin so she couldn't remove them by fighting him. Let me have my way, or we'll be here longer, he mimicked, repeating to Sakura her very own words when Sasuke had pushed her hand away from his forehead last night after he had overdosed on chakra pills. She laughed in response, her voice already beginning to strengthen from the newfound energy. Her damn inhuman strength also returned slightly, because she was suddenly pulling his palm away from her neck and no amount of his strength would be comparable enough to hers to keep it there, no matter how much he might want to. Sakura didn't let go of it though as Sasuke expected, but instead grasped it with her own as she, too, used her other hand to gently cup her fingers around the back of Sasuke's neck. There was no healing or sharing of chakra as he had done for her, and Sasuke realized that Sakura simply just wanted to experience the same sensation Sasuke had felt by touching her there. Sasuke was thankful for the darkness because the sudden intimacy made him blush and react instinctively. He smoothly pulled at her fingers, pulling her hand down so that the inside of her elbow hung over his neck instead, and he used her arm to help lift her from the ground. Sasuke led her down the dim tunnel that Gaara had apparently fashioned. What a mole Gaara was, Sasuke thought for a second, cutting corners and creating paths through the sand so he could make it from point A to point B in the shortest distance possible. Sorry, Sakura whispered beside him, she too, relishing this apparent excuse of supporting her to be so near to one another. I know physical contact isn't really one of your strengths. If I do something that makes you uncomfortable, please tell me. Sasuke nodded, not quite sure what he wanted to say to that. Yes, displays of affection would always be difficult, especially if anyone else was around. But there was a growing part of Sasuke that craved Sakura in ways he didn't know were within him. Just moments ago, he had watched her lift the back of Mako's shirt and run her hands along the traitor's back, and Sasuke had never frowned so deeply in his life at seeing her do so. She had performed such an action on countless ninja, including everyone in Team 7 at one point or another, and Sasuke couldn't understand why such an act now suggested something more sensual. She had healed him on his back before and Sasuke had never been bothered by her touch, but he suddenly couldn't stop imagining her fingers there. He had never had thoughts like this before, but then again, Sasuke had also never reached for a woman in the dark of a shared room, finding her lips with his mouth. Sasuke had crossed a line that he knew would require self-control from here on out. Let's get you back to the room, Sasuke stated as he shuffled her more securely against him. You need rest so that you can recover. When they made it back to the inn, which was conveniently not too far away from the underground prison, Sasuke opened the door for Sakura and stood within the frame after she entered. Observing her climb into bed and settling within the blankets, Sasuke asked something that had been bothering him ever since it occurred. What did Mako tell you? About what? She requested in return for clarification. When he told you to save your chakra, Sasuke prompted, probing his female friend's mind for information despite her exhaustion. He had to know the details if he were going to keep her safe. Oh, Sakura announced, sitting up on an elbow as she recalled the words. He said there were more of them out there, the group that was after us in Tanagakure. Sasuke nodded, his suspicions confirmed. He had already guessed this, considering he had yet to find someone with the correct size and voice as the ninja he had confronted in the hallway of Tanagakure's inn after the ninja had made an attempt to get Sakura to answer her door. I'm going back to the prison, Sasuke said suddenly, waiting a moment more in the doorframe for a response. Knowing him well, Sakura answered the question the Uchiha held on his tongue before he could even speak it. I'll be fine. Go. Dot 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 dot. When Sakura finally woke, it was dark in the room, except for the small ray of light shining in through the window from the crescent moon. Sakura rubbed the back of her stiff neck, not realizing until now that she had slept on it crookedly, her exhaustion apparently dragging her so deep into a sleep that she slept the entire day away. When she sat up, she started in surprise to see that Sasuke was still awake, sitting on his bed across the room, staring out the window. Sakura instantly recognized the fierce set of his jaw as one of annoyance. Sasuke. Sakura called out to him, "What's wrong?" When his eyes landed on hers, he narrowed them, silently contemplating his next words to her. The anger in them made Sakura rise to her feet and go over to him. She sat slowly beside him as he stared at her with an unhappiness that had Sakura's stomach dropping. "What happened?" Sakura asked again, reaching for his fingers splayed tensely across the bed. He didn't move them. "Why did you agree to let Gaara use you as bait to draw out the enemy?" he asked, forcing the words past his tightly set jaw. Sakura had never seen Sasuke upset with her like this and she didn't know how she was supposed to react. She just returned his angry stare with an even expression, sighing smallly as she released his hand. "It's the best option we have," she explained. "I know it's dangerous, but Gaara thinks." "I know what he thinks," Sasuke interrupted as he stood, pacing over to the window and away from her. "I just spent hours listening to potential plans designed around this mutual decision of yours." Sakura swallowed thickly as more of the pieces concerning his frustration came together. "What other alternative is there?" she began, trying to lead him back to the only solution that made the most sense. "I could go to Tanagakure, myself," Sasuke suggested, "and intercept them before they made it here. A covert operation with one person wouldn't involve Konoha and Suna. It would be discreet. You have other business here, Sasuke. Focus on your mission and I'll worry about this. I don't want this to distract you." "Before," Sasuke whispered in the dark. "The me before could have done so. But I can't now. What is the point of my mission to find the Otsutsuki race and eliminate them as a threat when I can't eradicate a group of ninjas set on killing you?" Sakura's heart stilled at such words, knowing how difficult it was for Sasuke to admit such a thing to her. Rising, she made her way over to him, tenderly tucking her arms around his sides as she had done many times before, resting her forehead against his back. "I can take care of this, Sasuke. You don't have to worry." There was no scoff or sneer at her words for saying such a ridiculous thing, and instead, Sasuke gripped her fingers at his waist like a lifeline. "I know," he admitted, turning in her arms to face her. Sakura's stomach dropped to her feet when he leaned his forehead against hers in the reflection of the moon. "I don't doubt your strength," he whispered. "But if something happened to you, I don't know who I'd become again." "Sasuke," she breathed, "you don't have to worry about such things because I'm not going anywhere, not now, not when I can finally do this." Carefully, Sakura stood on her tiptoes, closed the distance between their noses, and pecked the scowling Uchiha right on the lips. A beautiful thing happened next and Sakura locked the image into her heart to last her a lifetime. Sasuke smiled. Actually smiled. Just for a moment as he sighed in relief, and then his eyes lingered on her lips in return. His face grew serious again as he did so. Daringly, Sakura pulled on his hand, and Sasuke followed her to his bed against the wall. He hesitated as she rose onto the bed with her knees, turning so that she faced his still standing form, and cupped both of his cheeks with her palms. Sakura gazed into his dark eyes that reflected the moon as if they were their very own black in moonlit skies. She could see the struggle within them, so she didn't take another step, didn't make another move until Sasuke decided to do what Sakura knew he wanted to. As she started to loosen her tender hold on him, Sasuke found the nape of her neck with his hand, just as he had in Gaara's tunnel of sand, and she gasped at the warmth of his fingers. He crashed his mouth against hers, a kiss that was sweltering with need and desire, one so unlike the tender first kisses between them last night. At first, she was genuinely shocked at the emotions Sasuke was communicating through the kiss, and Sakura couldn't believe her luck. He was kissing her as a lover would, and she couldn't believe it. Sakura responded greedily, fastening her own fingers around the back of Sasuke's neck. She deepened the kiss, responding to his need with a need of her own. Sakura pulled him down to her as their mouths moved against one another until he had no choice but to straddle her knee. When Sakura's fingers found their way under the hem of his shirt, Sasuke sucked in a sharp breath and broke away from her mouth long enough to tear the shirt from his skin. He guided her hand slowly back to his spine, holding her eyes with his. "Touch me," he instructed. She did as he asked, running her fingers up along his back slowly. She wasn't so sure if she had just imagined him bite back a moan as he arched his back in response to her fingernails. Was this really happening? How far was he prepared to go with her? At this pace, they would. "Touch me, too," Sakura whispered against Sasuke's teeth when his mouth found hers again. He, too, found the hem of her shirt and pushed it away from the skin above her right hip. Angling them so that they were on their side facing one another, Sasuke slid his fingers around to her back and sighed her name when he felt the dip in her spine. "I have." Sakura began to bring up an important factor to the natural progression of events like this, but Sasuke withdrew his hand from her skin and kissed her slowly one last time before pulling away and sitting up on the bed. "It's not going to happen," he declared to the dark. Sakura couldn't help but feel the disappointment that suddenly doused the fire in her veins. "Why not?" she asked dejectedly, sitting back up to face him. She reached out longingly and traced the now exposed clavicle of his chest. "Think about it more before you decide," he said, tenderly pulling her fingers away from his skin. "I've given this plenty of thought," she admitted too hurriedly, and instantly wished she could recant the words at Sasuke's sudden smirk as he retrieved his shirt from the floor and slipped it over his head. "I mean," she tried again, retracting back the meaning behind that sentence. "I want this. Let's keep you alive over the next few days. I don't want us distracted by this." Distracted? Did he really not know that this almost that had happened between them would distract her every waking thought for the next several days? Her mind would recall every second and the longing for more would intensify the distraction. Sakura pouted silently to herself as she treaded back over to her bed across the room. Sasuke didn't breathe another word and neither did she, because if they spoke or broke the silence, they might find their way back toward one another in the dark, and Sakura had already promised to respect his wishes when he felt uncomfortable. Damn her mouth. After performing her rounds at the hospital the next morning, Sakura found herself staring into Mako's cell again as the man who betrayed her looked at her dejectedly through the bars. His head was rested back against the wall and his chin jutted forward as he watched her. Ironically, Sakura came carrying a cup of tea in her palms, debating on whether to drink it herself or offer it to Mako. When she placed the steaming cup through the bars and onto the ground, sliding it forward carefully to refrain from sloshing it over the porcelain rim, Mako raised an eyebrow and snorted a dubious laugh. "You can't be serious, right?" Sakura shrugged her shoulders innocently in response. "I thought we agreed to be close colleagues again." He sat up straight as he responded. "I don't remember agreeing to that. Second, we were never really close to begin with. I only ever gave you the tea to lull you into a sense of trust." Sakura dismissed the confession because it was already common knowledge between them anyway, and said, "Yes, yes. I'm aware. Then you have a distressing sense of humor," Mako breathed, gesturing to the tea between them as he stood from his lonely, reclined spot against the sand-constructed wall at the back of his cell. Stooping, Mako reached for the tea and cradled it in his hands all the way down as he replaced its spot on the floor with his cross-legged figure. Sakura mirrored Mako's sitting position on the other side of the bars strategically, a tactic she often used when talking with someone she wanted to make feel at ease. Seeing straight through the method, Mako sipped the tea before asking sarcastically, am I due for another therapy session now, Doc? Sakura shrugged off his sardonic comment and decided to move straight to the point. Where is the heart of your organization? Are they based in Tanagakure? Mako shot his eyebrows up, swallowing the tea thickly at the abrupt question. He replied with another patronizing question. Doesn't your case cage know that? Why don't you go and ask him? Sakura said bluntly, he more than likely does. But I don't. I want you to tell me yourself. Mako set his tea down, suspicion darkening his gaze. There's a reason you don't want to ask him, then. Tell me and I'll consider sharing what I know with you. Sakura was either extremely transparent today, or Mako had truly spent their time together as physicians studying her so thoroughly that he was able to see straight through to some of her thoughts, and it gave Sakura a slithering sensation of uncertainty in her gut. Sakura frowned back at Mako for his intuitive guess, because in all honesty, Sakura had spent the morning tending to a countless number of patients, recalling familiar faces and learning new names, and had recoiled once again at Gaara's plans of an inevitable confrontation within Sunagakure. Even though none of this was Sakura's fault, she couldn't help but feel like her presence in the Sand Village endangered the citizens here. She had wanted to believe that Gaara had everything under control, especially since Kakashi, Shikamaru, and the rest of Team 7 were here and ready to go through with plans of Gaara's design. Sakura, too, had convinced Sasuke last night to trust in Gaara's approach, saying, it's the best option we have. To which, Sasuke had interjected with the idea of going to Tanagakure to intercept the enemy himself, saying, a covert operation with one person wouldn't involve Konoha and Suna. It would be discreet. And at first, Sakura had rejected this idea because it didn't make sense. Sasuke had his mission. To tangle himself up in this now when he had just had a breakthrough would delay his progress and distract him from a far superior threat to Konoha. And Gaara was more than capable of handling this, but then again, Sakura believed that so was she. And so, Sakura had contemplated Sasuke's covert operation with one person idea throughout the night, wondering if it wasn't an entirely preposterous plan if only it didn't involve the Uchiha, but her instead. As Mako blinked at her, expecting her response, Sakura covered for herself by saying, I just want to confirm his suspicions. Liar, he accused, and Sakura frowned again at Mako's own forthrightness. He had stopped hiding himself, Sakura realized. He was allowing her to see who he truly was, and Sakura felt somewhat sad knowing that the kind and exceedingly thoughtful version who had fooled her truly had just been a ruse. This Mako was abrasive and it kind of reminded Sakura of the sensation of having just a little too much salt, not enough to deter you from the food, but more than enough to make you blanch and investigate the dish more carefully. What can I possibly do in here? He asked as he motioned around him at Gaara's impenetrable sand, no longer humming in the air, but solid and unyielding in its shape of the tunnels and countless cells. Sand that Sakura was sometimes wary around simply because of its desire to do its master's bidding. As if specks of it could wisp away to speak into the cage's ear whenever it wished. Sakura knew she was being too paranoid simply because she was harboring a secret plan of her own, one that Mako was beginning to discern. Could she tell him? Should she tell him? As if he could sense her hesitation, he added, I did promise to spend the rest of my life, however short it may be, atoning for my actions, you know. And it's not like I can run off and tell your secrets now, can I? Not entirely ready to believe him or trust in him again, Sakura sighed and told him a half-truth instead. I want to know that, because I want to talk to the organization myself. Mako's eyebrows raised and he laughed sharply. You want to talk to them? Sakura nodded. All of his false humor instantly died away at her confirmation. Listen, if Leaf Shinobi just show up there, on their turf, things are not going to go your way. They certainly aren't going to talk to you about anything. And why is that? Sakura questioned. Because you are not their only target. Sakura's stomach dropped at his sudden revelation. What do you mean? I thought. You are a target. Mako interrupted. A very big target, their most important one, but not their only one. You are at the top of the list. But after you, there will be others. Like whom? She probed. Anyone with power and influence whose ideals align with yours. People responsible with healing the next generation directly. Doctors, missionaries, leaders, teachers. The list goes on. How many members? Sakura asked, leaning toward the bars. And is the shade not the leader? Not many, actually, but growing by the day. Mako confessed easily and quickly, and Sakura could see that it was the truth. Kasek, the man of shadow you refer to as a shade, is one of the leaders. But there are others. He is not the mastermind. Then who is? I was new and never made it that far into the organization to find out. Hisa didn't even know, and she has been involved much longer. They operate on a need-to-know basis, and she only ever consulted Kasek. I see, Sakura sighed, hoping for more intel than that. They are based in Tani as the cage expects, but they are spread out. Or were, as they looked for you and the others. They might be dispersed and not all at the central location. From what I could gather from my conversations with the others, finding them all will be like searching for one cockroach at a time in a growing infestation. Sakura bit the inside of her cheek as she listened to this last bit, not entirely sure what she was expecting in the sense of her enemies' locations. Sakura hadn't been so naive to hope that she could locate a singular location with all the bees inside their hive, but she had hoped for something more positive than the dismal reality that they might not be located at their base at all. This group and their teams and separation reminded Sakura, eerily of the Akatsuki. And if all of this was true, it was wise to only take Mako's advice with a grain of salt. This brought Sakura full circle to Gaara's plan, which was to lure them into Sunagakure. She hated to throw a wrench in any plans, but Sasuke was right. She needed to do something else, something less dangerous for everyone. She had learned what she needed, so Sakura stood, dusting the sand off her pants. Mako jumped up at her sudden indication of departure and blurted, "What's your plan?" "I only told you this so you would think twice about whatever schemes you have. Even with your friend's help, it's dangerous. They will kill you." Sakura wanted to laugh at the preposterous idea of Naruto, Kakashi, and Sasuke being taken down by any enemy at this point. The three of them would die from old age, she was sure of it. She even had confidence in her own abilities despite how aware she was of the fact that this newly formed organization had no hesitancy to take her life. She vividly recalled how Mako had tried to convince Hisa to spare her life, arguing that she was too useful to kill. But she had bested them, hadn't she? Even the shade who had corpseified her arms. Would I have really learned my lesson if I told you my plan? Sakura asked him as she placed a hand on her hip and smiled pointedly at him. But Mako grabbed the bars between them, eyes narrowing once again. "Listen, I know you have no reason to trust me, but take me with you." Sakura laughed out loud this time, unable to help herself as she covered her mouth with the soft side of her curved hand. Mako only glared. "Take you? Why on earth would I do that?" "Because," he hissed, "I could help you. You could use my affiliation with the group in whatever way you thought was best. They will more than likely kill me, but I could come up with something to get us in." Sakura's smile disappeared. "The only help I need from you is for you to stay in this cell where you can't stab me in the back again. I may have extended a hand of collaboration to you, but that doesn't mean I'm dumb enough to trust you completely." Mako instantly responded with a frown, "You're making a mistake." Sakura turned her back to him, ordering, "Start planning for your future here while I am away. The clinic needs you." As she began walking down the dark corridor of the underground tunnel toward the exit, she heard Mako yell after. You're going by yourself." But she didn't respond. The sand door that had fallen away before, floated back into form behind her, solidifying into a solid, soundproof barrier once more. Dot. Despite his words last night, Sasuke was the one who was distracted. distracted from his mission by so many different things, all of them pertaining to a certain pink-haired kunoichi whose cherry blossom color bled into every crevice of his mind. Pale fingers tracing his back in the dark privacy of a shared room, Mako's declaration of incoming enemies with the purpose of killing her, and Gaara's various plans for their arrival were at the top of his thought list, right up there along with how much he wanted to throttle his blonde best friend for his incessant slurping. Sasuke was trying to explain to Kakashi the development of his mission regarding the footpill's ability to lengthen his span of jump between Kagai's dimensions. At the mention of food pills, however, Naruto had insisted he was going to resort to eating some of Sakura's disgusting mudballs himself very soon if they didn't make a food stop and continued this discussion over a meal. And so, this is where Sasuke currently found himself, sitting annoyingly squished in a small corner of a crowded food market stall located in the busiest section of the market square, closing his eyes tightly as Naruto shoved another bite of seasoned rice and meat stew loudly down his oversized gullet. And now Kakashi had just brought up the very topic Sasuke had been brooding over since Gaara had announced to the group his plans on dealing with Sakura's newfound enemies. The very topic that had Sasuke so distracted. Sasuke had been fantasizing ways to take out that lazy, spiky-haired strategist for even suggesting that Sakura be used as a lure in the first place. Shikamaru did not sit amongst them at the moment because he had better things to do, in Suna at the moment, which thankfully kept him out of Sasuke's sight. Let's convene again with Sakura and the cage this evening, Kakashi suggested, somehow managing to eat without revealing the face behind the mask. We need to consider the next steps carefully. Gaara can handle it, Naruto said, almost unintelligibly through a humongous bite of rice. Whatever he says, we can trust him with it. Or we could handle it, Sasuke put out there, seeing an opportunity to change the situation and going for it instantly. Quietly and effectively. Just us. No sand village. Naruto choked in his excitement at such a notion, agreeing with Sasuke immediately. I like that idea better. Sasuke voiced in agreement with Naruto, whom technically had just agreed with him, but Sasuke didn't care, because he wasn't past emphasizing his own statement at this point. Thanks for watching.